Jacka Jacka Jan, Jacka Jacka Jan, Jacka Jan. I got a new cup, it's got Kuropi on it. He's my favourite Sanrio character. Hello my friends and welcome to this video. I'm so glad you're here. In this video I want to talk about a technique that I use in my personal practice that I find very, very useful. And that is the use of signifier cards. I made a text post on this like a bajillion years ago at this point, which was based on a TikTok that is still pinned to my profile if you want to go watch it. But as we should all be aware by now, I am making all of my old text posts into videos, so they are more accessible to more people. So, I suppose we should start with the basics. What is a signifier card? A signifier card is a tarot card that you use in your tarot readings to signify something, a person, a spirit, or an object. A signifier can be used in a reading for a variety of reasons, but many use them to help give clarity and context that they wouldn't otherwise get in their readings. Using signifier cards is relatively easy. I personally use them as a way of being able to denote who's being spoken about in particular situations, or if there is a particular person, object, or guide that I need to be talking to in order to progress my journey. So, if you want to start using signifier cards, how do you choose one to start with? Well, this is going to depend on the situation. Because a signifier card has so many uses, it's useful to split them up into a couple of different categories. Firstly, the personal signifier. These types of signifying cards will be used for yourself and for anybody that is being read for in a given reading. You could have a signifier card for yourself, your partner, your family members, your friends, etc., etc. Next, we have spiritual signifiers. Spiritual signifiers would be cards that represent a specific spiritual entity or concept that you may interact or work with on a regular basis. Deities, ancestors, spirit guides, even your higher self. You can have a card for that. Lastly, we have conceptual signifiers. The conceptual signifier is for anything rather than anyone, representing specific items, events, or times, or even the dynamics of a relationship that you can't express with a singular card for just one person. These can also be used for potential events like having kids, getting married, etc., etc. Now that we've established those categories, let's look at the best methods for choosing those signifiers in any given instance. For personal signifiers, it can be as simple as just picking one that you feel like suits you or that suits the person that you're reading for. This is just as valid a method as any of the ones that I'm going to mention here. And most importantly, choosing one and sticking to it is generally the fastest, easiest, and most intentional method. Unfortunately, it can also come with some caveats. For one, it can be easy to misrepresent somebody if you pick their signifier for them. And for some people, it can be very difficult choosing just one card to represent their whole self, or to represent someone in their life. My personal preferred method is that if you are reading for other people, that you get them to choose their signifier cards. This is a good choice for making sure that the person being read for feels connected to their card and therefore should result in some more accurate results. I also recommend this for spiritual signifiers. Asking your deities or guides to choose the card that they would like to be represented with through whatever medium you choose to ask them in is not only a good exercise in intuitive ability and channeling in some instances, but it also gives your guides some agency in the work that you do together. All spirit work is a two-way street. So giving the other party in the equation some agency does generally result in not only consistent readings, but also accurate ones. Lastly, you could choose your signifier based on a framework. Technically, this is something that you could be doing with the other methods as well, but I digress. This is more of a reading by reading method than an overarching one for a lot of people, but it's very useful for getting a greater perspective, especially if you're asking vaguer questions. For instance, if asking a question about a family in which you are the child in the situation, you can use the Emperor to represent your paternal figure, the Empress for your maternal figure, and the Sun to represent yourself, the child. If you're asking about a work environment though, you could represent yourself with the Seven of Pentacles as a worker, your boss or manager as the Hierophant to represent the status quo in the institution, and your co-workers as the Three of Pentacles, representing teamwork and communication. Or the Seven of Swords if your co-workers are a little bit shitty. The framework method is generally a good way of creating clarity around people in a situation, especially when it comes to situations with hierarchies. And it also works for singular readings, so you can use that same one every single time you need to do a one-off reading. One question I get asked a lot is if you need to use the same signifier once you've picked yours. And the answer is not at all. You can change your signifier whenever you feel like it. But this isn't something that you should do flippantly, especially if you're looking at changing a signifier for somebody else. The regular rules of conduct apply. Ask if you want to change something that's not yours. It's also important to note that the changing of your signifier card can also change the results of your readings, as the card that you pick is going to relate to the other cards in your deck differently. Each card still maintains its original meaning whilst also being your signifier card. So you might find that you get different cards while the overarching answer is the same. But since we were talking about that framework method, I want to mention some of the common signifiers that get used in systems like this. For many people, starting with a basic connection in terms of meaning can really help you grasp the concept of signifier cards. So here are some contextual signifiers that might help you. We'll start with family because that's generally the easiest one. For mothers, you can use the Empress or any of the Queen cards. For fathers, you can use the Emperor or any of the King cards. For children, you could use the Sun, the Fool, or any of the Page cards. For situations with siblings, you could use the Three of Pentacles, the Three of Cups, or the Six of Cups. For extended family or people outside of your immediate family, you could use the Ten of Cups, or the Four of Wands. At this point that you can then add personalized signifiers for aunties, uncles, cousins, grandparents, etc. Moving on to the workplace, you can use the Seven of Pentacles to represent the self. This works for both yourself, the person, and the concept of work, as in whatever you do for a job. For a manager or boss, you can use the King or Queen of any suit, depending on their personality. For a colleague, you can use the Three of Pentacles, or Knights or Pages of any of the suits. Again, personality dependent. For the concept of promotions or new jobs, you could use maybe the Six of Pentacles, the Six of Wands, the Three of Wands, or the Nine of Cups. Context will vary on this one, so use your own discretion. And for ongoing projects, you could use the Eight of Pentacles, the Two of Pentacles, or the Three of Pentacles. Moving on to love and romance. For lovers and active partnerships, you could use the Lovers card, the Two of Cups, or the Ten of Cups, though this generally represents a co-parent, or a knight of any suit. For exes, generally speaking, be that toxic exes or people that you just broke up with because it wasn't working, you could use the Six of Cups, the Seven of Swords, the Three of Swords, or again, a knight of any suit. For a potential love interest, you could have, again, a knight of any suit, the Chariot, the Magician, or the Ace of Cups. The use of the knight's representation in this section is generally about the fact that the people that you get into relationships with are on your level or in your general demographic. These knights are the actors, and that is generally what is needed in order to start a relationship. In the spiritual sphere now, when talking about ancestors or trying to represent them as a whole, you could use the Ten of Pentacles, the Ten of Cups, or the Four of Wands, making sure everybody's represented in the party. For spirit guides, we could have someone like the High Priestess, the Hierophant, Judgment, or the Four of Cups. Kinda depends on who you're talking about. If you work with some kind of animal guide, then the Moon, Strength, the Ten of Pentacles, or a Knight of any suit could work. Though the Knights are generally representative of a combination of a spiritual guide and an animal spirit. They're a pair like the knight and their horse. Lastly, for spiritual progression and events, things like processing past traumas or developing new skills spiritually, sometimes developing a new level of connection spiritually, we could use something like the Moon, the King or Queen of Cups, the Queen of Pentacles, the Tower, the Star, Judgment, the World, the Wheel of Fortune, or even Death. Because spiritual events and progress cover such a broad spectrum of not only emotions but also types of events, it means that you kind of have to use your own discretion as to how you want those represented. Some spiritual progression involves other people and therefore you can represent them as a person, but some events are specifically just events, and they can be covered very easily using a variety of different major arcana cards. I personally recommend using these more common signifiers when having to do one-off readings or reading for a very specific event, because it's a lot faster than having to decipher the meanings based on your personal signifier cards that you use personally. Over time though, for yourself or if you have a client that you're working with, it will become more apparent as to what specific cards mean for you or that person, and you'll be able to shift those signifier cards accordingly. Okay, I think that's everything. I hope this could be something that you can sink your teeth into, and it can be helpful in developing your own personal practice. But as always, feel free to leave me a comment or a DM if you have any questions or you want to talk further about this subject. Or any other subject for that matter. I enjoy talking about these topics a lot. If you're interested in more tarot techniques, check out the other videos in my How to Tarot playlist, and consider joining me on Patreon, where I do these videos on a monthly basis, and where I also do one-to-one readings and lessons, show behind-the-scenes content, and we have a book club. It's very, very fun. I also have other social media that you can follow. Please go follow there. And I hope to see you again soon. But until then, stay blessed, my friend.